their loved one isn't a statistic. It's their mum, it's their nan, it's their sister.
So this is all about sharing and highlighting the work of incredible key workers at this time, much like Jess last week and much like Claire today. And it's always about sharing the work that they do, especially when it comes to things like what Claire does as a celebrant. Many people won't actually know what this is about. Tell us about yourself. What is a celebrant?
Okay, a celebrant is an officiant, if you like, somebody who works with families or couples. If it's a wedding celebrant, I trained in weddings and namings and funerals, but funerals is where my heart is. So I'm going to speak really from the perspective of a funeral celebrant, if you like, working with families, with the bereaved, to help them create a fitting farewell, a perfect farewell for their loved one, their lost loved one, whatever that is, whatever a fitting farewell is.
And that's a really difficult task in itself on an average kind of situation. That's a really difficult and personal task that you've got to do there.
Very personal.
Because in this situation, it's a little bit different. We'll talk about how it's different shortly, but give us an idea of what a normal service would be for you.
Well, there's not really any such thing as a normal service. The important thing is to honour that person and their life in whatever way the family feels is fitting, or perhaps the person who has passed away has left instruction. So that could be very personal words, music. It could be a succession of family members stepping up and giving their own personal memories, or perhaps they would want me to write and deliver everything for them, with obviously with their input.
You are a key worker for obvious reasons, because sadly people still require the need to say goodbye in these times, and perhaps more so. In what way would you say that the services are different?
Well, I think the most obvious difference is the number of attendees. A big restriction on attendees. That is a big difference. There are obviously a lot of other differences. Social distancing, very, very important. Sanitising the crematorium. People are turning up wearing masks and gloves occasionally. I'm talking about the mourners here. Things that we take for granted, being able to shoulder in, so that's the pallbearers carrying the coffin in, which is so dignified and respectful. That's not allowed to happen. Minimising the handling on the coffins. The curtains need to close. That is a crematorium restriction at the moment, is it, that the curtains do need to close. So there is a lot of change, but the content of the service is hopefully still intimate and personal, and the family still have all their input in that.
I've been saying to people that they can get their questions in throughout the week, and people have been, and thank you very much if you have been sending your questions in for Claire today. This is something that's come up a lot. What's the most difficult thing for you at the moment with work? Not
being able to hug people. It's heartbreaking. You're seeing people heartbroken, and my instinct would be to hug them, or even just from a formal point of view, shaking hands with my funeral directors and there's chapel attendants. They're all doing a remarkable job. It's very, very sad, and I have to say it has. To start with, when the lockdown first came in, it was particularly hard, because some of those families I was working with had actually put together very large services, were expecting 200 people, big people within the community. So it's heartbreaking. In the crematoria that I work in, they've got pews and they are allowing families to sit within their household. There are other crematoria around the country who have the chairs spaced out at 2 meters. So you are only allowed to sit in a chair, and that could be a child sat in one chair 2 meters away from her parents. Wow. Her granddad's funeral. I found the other day that I did a service, and the family were holding, little bits of tissue in their gloved hands, and it was just surreal. They're wiping their face, they've got these gloves on, and it was just surreal. So that lack of contact which is absolutely necessary. I mean, I'm not complaining. We need the social distancing. It's vital. But it's heartbreaking that, you know, normally I would have next of kin coming out, possibly falling into my arms at the end of a service. Now I'm having to sort of hold my chest or, you know, indicate that they're in my heart and in my thoughts, but you can't console them.
I mean, it's vital not only for them, but for you. You're putting your life on the line here for what you're doing as a key worker. You are out there, you know. I know that from speaking to you before, you said that it doesn't feel that way.
No, I'm just doing my job, Jonny.
Yeah, to do your job, but you are risking your life by doing that. So it is incredibly important. But does that ever go through your mind that you are risking your life to do what you do for a living now?
Probably no more than you know, nurses and that on the front line. They really are putting their life on the line, I believe, and they probably just think they're doing their job. I did a funeral a couple of weeks ago, and I did have a family email me and say, you know, Joe wasn't your family, but you are turning up for us and putting your life at risk to take this service, and we're so grateful that you are. I mean, my biggest fear was that we would end up, which has happened in some parts of the country, we'd end up with no attendees being permitted at funerals, which would be heartbreaking. I just couldn't bear that.
So in that situation, what would be the answer? Would it be almost a virtual service? Or? And
we are being webcast a lot now. There is an option of webcasting or audio or video recordings being made. So in some cases, if there were no attendees, it could be that people were watching at a distance, be they shielded, be they just people who couldn't travel. It's not the same.
How long do you predict, Claire? I mean, obviously you know what we know and know more, I'm guessing, but how long do you predict these sort of ceremonies will last?
What, in the current format that they're in now?
The current format that they are, yeah.
I think we're going to be with it for a long time. I think social distancing more than anything else. I think other elements of lockdown perhaps may be lifted before social distancing, I think, is going to be with us from some time. And to be honest, Jonny, I actually have no issue with them staying as they are. Obviously, we would prefer things differently, but I would prefer them as they are to not be happening at all. So I'm grateful for what we've got.
Are you seeing a lot more of these types of funerals now? Has the rate of funerals increased?
Yes, is the short answer. Rates of funerals, in my experience, and I can only really speak for myself, I have seen quite. I have seen an increase in the number of services I'm being asked to be taken. Yes, whether that's excess deaths, or you know, I have had sadly coronavirus victims, but not that many. I've had half a dozen, services that sadly where the person has passed from COVID-19.
And how are you personally coping with it all?
Very luckily, I was trained with the Fellowship of Independent Celebrants, and that's just an amazing body of people. So celebrants that I've trained with, or I've worked with, or I meet with. We have a session once a week, a support session where we all exchange how we're feeling, and in a private space, if you like, on Zoom. That it's a safe space where we can trust each other to offload, if you like, and to take part in meditations or whatever, if that's what we need.
And again, I guess that shows the times that we're in now, where you're now speaking with your colleagues again over Zoom virtually. Are you missing that kind of close relationship with your colleagues?
Yes and no. I mean, obviously the celebrants are all over the country, so we would only meet up periodically. So I think we would meet, generally speaking, would be virtually anyway. I miss meeting with families, because that's obviously now become virtual as well, telephone or Zoom or Skype or whatever's best for the family. I miss that. From a day-to-day point of view, I still see my funeral directors, I still see the chapel attendants, obviously 2 meters. We're all very responsible in that way. And they help because they're great people, and although always very respectful, you won't find a sense of humour any better than that within the funeral industry. Let's say respectful, but I think it has to be you know, you have to have a bit of a sense of humour to be able to cope. I mean, I'm very fortunate, Jonny. I love what I do. I mean, I don't love seeing
What is it
people.
that you love?
I love every aspect. Other than seeing people distressed, I love the fact that people genuinely are so grateful that you've helped them at the end. You know, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say making a difference, but I do feel I've making a difference. I mean, I trained as a Samaritan, and I think that kind of gave me the satisfaction of actually, you know, the more you put out to something, the more you do get back. And it is, as I say, perhaps cheesy to say making a difference and helping people, but there's no job like it. It really is.
I don't think it's cheesy at all. I think it's spot on. I think that's exactly what you're doing, and more so in this time, you know, where families, that you're there with them at probably the hardest part that they've had in their life today. You know, so you're there sharing that experience and trying to give them comfort. And sometimes at these events and, you know, funerals, you can't find the words yourself. So to have someone like yourself that can say the words that they feel, is
Absolutely.
a really worthwhile and helpful, you know, and beautiful thing that you're doing. Now, in terms of your family, how do they feel about you being out there and working in this current climate?
They know that I'm taking every precaution to stay safe. Yeah, they worry a little bit, but they know I'm taking every precaution, and bless them, they are so proud of what I do, and that's very touching. I mean, I've had friends as well as family who've messaged me on a Thursday night who say, we're clapping for you along with the nurses, which is really very, very touching that they're thinking of me and my colleagues in the funeral industry.
Finally, it's something that I'm asking everyone in these key worker chats about their individual circumstances. If the government were listening right now, if Boris Johnson was listening, would you change anything for the way that funerals are currently being conducted?
Would I change anything? Well, one thing I would say to Boris Johnson, certainly right now, is please, I appreciate the charts, and the numbers are really, really important, but behind every one of those numbers, and I know they do acknowledge that at the briefings, that behind every single one of those numbers is a family, is a story, is you know, somebody's the family's mental health and well-being is obviously key. I think the most important thing for me is I'm just glad that we can still at the moment perform funerals, and that the government do appreciate. I mean, they did do a bit of a U-turn a few weeks ago. Now a lot of the cemeteries that were closed and the crematorium grounds that were closed, they've realised how important that is for people's mental health, not to be shut off from visiting graves and visiting. So I think that's what I'd say to the government. Don't ever forget the individuals, and don't ever forget the families and their well-being, mental health, because this has really affected people's health mentally.
I think that's spot on, because, you know, you do see on these coronavirus updates every day that they talk about the statistics, and sadly the numbers have spiraled so much that it just becomes, oh, another 500 people have died. But I think it's really important with what you're saying there, that that's another 500 families that are suffering. It's another 500 individuals that we've lost. So it's important to keep sight that these aren't numbers, these are people.
Yeah, and I sometimes have on a couple of occasions when the families have wanted me to in a funeral service acknowledge that their loved one isn't a statistic. Yeah. It's their mum, it's their nan, it's their sister.
Claire, I'm really conscious that this is your Sunday evening, so I will ask the questions that people who follow me on Instagram have been asking throughout the week. There's a few here that I will ask, as well as some that have been asked during this chat. Isabel says, do you not have to wear PPE whilst doing the services?
No, we don't have to. The PPE is definitely being used by the funeral professionals, and I know there has been, you know, they've been struggling a bit because they have to get their own PPE. No, it's the social distancing that's important. I wear gloves as I walk into the chapel. There is sanitizer there, which I use, and everybody sanitizes before they go into the chapel. It's washed down in between services very thoroughly. So there's no cushions, for example, on the chairs, because everything gets wiped down between services.
Laura asked, what's been the most touching moment for you as a celebrant during these times?
It's the words of thanks from families and appreciation. I did have one lady last week say about how, you know, she's so grateful for celebrants and people in our profession for what we're doing, and she called me a hero.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, that's the thing is, you are for these people, because you're giving them some support on the hardest day of their life. So it's very true. All of you key workers, you absolutely are, you know, heroes in these times. We also have another one here, and this is from Ashley Gregory, who says, "How rewarding do you find it being in such a difficult role?"
Oh, it's hugely rewarding. It always has been. I mean, coronavirus has made it different, Jonny, but in lots of ways, it's still all about. It's not about me. It's about the family, and it's always about what their wishes are, and just really focusing on. Doesn't matter what the restrictions are. Obviously, maintaining them and keeping everybody safe, but just how do we give, within the restrictions we've got, how do we give this person what they deserve?
Well, Claire, it's a very, very strange situation that we're in at the moment.
Oh, it is.
As they say, and it is the clangor of the word, but unprecedented times.
It is truly unprecedented.
Every single industry, including yours, and you're doing an incredible job. Thank you so much for doing what you do and giving people closure in the most difficult time. So I'm conscious that you have your Sunday evening. So thank you so much, Claire, for joining us today. Remember, if you know someone who is a key worker, if you're a key worker yourself and you'd love to come and have a chat about your job, why you love your job, why you love your colleagues, anything that you do, it can be any form of key worker, come and have a chat with me. Just go into the DMs and we'll sort something out. But thank you so much. Stay safe. And thank you again, Claire.
Thank you, Jonny.